Reliance on the automobile throughout most of North America not only continues, it accelerates. Except where logic prevailed. On the Florida Peninsula,
more than $300 million in federal tax dollars is coming here to help build the high-speed rail from Tampa to Orlando. That's on top of $2 billion of federal money already committed.
That's what we want.
So he's just shut down a bunch of jobs.
Private companies are bidding to build and to operate the high-speed rail.
The addition of integrated real estate development aligns two economic engines that directly support one another that has more than one way to pay the bills.
We cannot afford to let this opportunity pass us by.
Please exit through the rear door.
Doors open.
I've been a fan of Brightline from the beginning. Brightline is one of the most exciting projects in the US. The shiny trains, the new stations, the impeccable service. But who is Brightline? What is this company? In this video, we'll cover the lies, the corruption, and the reality behind the facade. Before I get into the present state of this company, I think it's important that we go back a couple decades. This way we can discover how and why this company was created. Quick thing before we start the video, if there's anything more annoying than American transportation, it's working with Adobe software. Editing and animating this 1-hour video and dealing with several crashes and bugs along the way.
For the love of God! For the love of God! Please! Damn! Damn!
Nearly drove me insane. With that being said, if we get to 1,000 likes, then I promise I'll do another one of these humongous videos for California High-Speed Rail in the future as well. That will probably be around like 2 hours. Yikes. But trust me, if this video hits 1,000 likes,
I'll f***ing do it again.
I'm crazy like that. I will. Anyways, enjoy the video.
the Fox, the nation's first high-speed rail system. Barely 30 minutes out of its modern passenger terminal within the Miami Airport complex, the Fox will arrive in Orlando an hour from now. Less than 60 minutes from its Orlando departure, the Fox will breathe the still morning air of Tampa. Before the turn of the century, in the 1990s, the Florida Department of Transportation presented an innovative plan to make the system a reality. The idea was to create a long-term partnership with the private sector to immediately connect Miami, Orlando, and Tampa, and soon after, Jacksonville. Eventually, other business, tourism, and population centers would be included. It was to be an efficient system, publicly owned, privately built, and operated. The private sector partner was chosen. It was the Florida Overland Express Group, a consortium comprised of 4 of the most respected names in transportation, construction, program management, and infrastructure. There was Fluor Daniel, the largest publicly traded engineering and construction company in the United States. There was Odebrecht Contractors of Florida, civil construction experts in 21 countries on 4 continents. There was Bombardier, a world-class manufacturer of transportation equipment and the largest provider of rail cars in North America. It was Bombardier that manufactured and supplied rail cars for the newly expanded Tri-Rail and the Tampa Airport People Mover. And there was Jacques Alstom, an internationally acknowledged leader in the field of energy and rail transport, developer of proven TGV train technology, utilized in creating the fastest, safest passenger trains in the world. That was the team in 1995. It is still the team in 2007. And just look at what the Florida Overland Express Group has created and maintained. In the past 12 months alone, more than 5 million passengers have enjoyed the speed, convenience, comfort, and safety of the Florida Overland Express. Electric power moves the Florida Overland Express quickly and efficiently along its new state-of-the-art network of tracks. And how does this new system affect the roads that cross its path? Actually, not at all. There are no automobile crossings anywhere along the train's route. Roads over or under the tracks keep automobile traffic moving smoothly. And raised tracks allow for undisturbed boat traffic along Florida's waterways. 10 years ago, a high-speed rail system for the state of Florida was just a dream. And now, in the year 2007, while the rest of North America examines the success of the Florida Overland Express, the fouling of our air and increasing demands on our highway system continue. Except in Florida, where logic prevailed.
Except logic didn't prevail. The state of Florida canceled their project because they used too much of their transportation budget. A transportation budget that was already severely low, by the way. The Florida Overland Express would have used TGV train sets, meaning 2 power cars, 7 coaches, and a lounge car. Trains would have operated at 200 miles per hour. The high-speed rail line would have had 7 stations. These include Miami Airport, West Broward, West Palm Beach, Orlando Airport, Orlando Attractions, Lakeland, and downtown Tampa. The project was to be America's first high-speed rail line and to be completed in 2004. But because of Florida being Florida and deciding not to spend a single cent on their transportation budget, they canceled the project in 1999. But this wasn't going to be a problem for long, because in the coming decade, the state of Florida was going to receive the biggest transportation Hail Mary in American history.
Some are calling Florida a big winner today. More than $300 million in federal tax dollars is coming here to help build the high-speed rail from Tampa to Orlando. That's on top of $2 billion of federal money already committed. Construction could start by 2012, and it could be up and running by 2015.
In the year 2000, Floridians approved a bill for there to be a high-speed rail line between Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. 5 stops were planned on that line. This included Miami, West Broward, West Palm Beach, Orlando, Lakeland, and Tampa. The project was to be federally and state funded, with the Florida Department of Transportation owning the trains and the infrastructure. The Florida High-Speed Rail Authority was created with this, pretty similar to the California High-Speed Rail project. The first phase was Tampa to Orlando, with the second one from Orlando to Miami. So basically Brightline, but backwards. The train was to be high speed and reach up to speeds of 168 miles per hour. Funny enough, the train was supposed to run alongside existing highway and interstate infrastructure. Phase 1 of the project was to come at a cost of $2.4 billion, with Phase 2 estimated to be around $8 billion. Now, Phase 2 was interesting. Phase 2 came with 2 different options. Option number 1 was to continue the electrification from Phase 1 down to Phase 2 and use Siemens Velaro sets. This would have helped the authority reach their 186 mile per hour goal. And the other option was to use the Bombardier jet train.
We use a turbine that's normally used on an airplane also, but here it's used to generate electricity.
This train was literally an unelectrified Acela. Dude, wait till you see the... no. This train would have not had a top speed of 186 miles per hour, and instead would have had a top speed of 150 miles per hour. The jet train choice was purely studied off of cost grounds. The authority projected that a construction of an unelectrified high-speed rail corridor could have cost $3 million less per mile. Phase 1 would have had around 14 to 22 daily round trips, with Phase 2 having around 16. Ridership estimates for Phase 2 were around 6 million passengers annually, with Phase 1 being around 2 million passengers annually for 2010, and around 3 million passengers by 2025. In the end, because of Rick Scott, the ridership would be 0. It's also important to note that during this time, Amtrak would begin to get a little antsy, probably because they heard about all the state money and government funding flying around the state of Florida. In 2010, Amtrak Miami to Jacksonville service will start to be studied along the Florida East Coast Railroad. Out of all the high-speed and higher-speed rail projects within Florida, I'm actually happy that this one fell through. Although the implementation of this service would have been cheaper, trains would have operated at 90 miles per hour, and the corridor would have only seen 5 round trips per day. The highest ridership estimate for service starting in 2013 was 190,000. Yeah, not amazing. Anyways, back to the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority. Unfortunately, Jeb Bush was just not feeling it and decided to veto all the funding for the project. But the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority went through and completed all the environmental impact statements for Phase 1 anyways. But without funding, no more work could be done. Jeb Bush successfully killed the project. Or so he thought. The project gained new life after the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. The FRA named Florida a crucial state for high-speed rail. With this, the state of Florida began prepping and directed more funds to Sunrail and Tri-Rail. And this worked. By proving that they wanted a more adequate rail system, the federal government announced that Florida would receive $1.25 billion. On top of this, $1.2 billion in high-speed rail funds would be redirected from the states of Wisconsin and Ohio to help out Florida. Don't feel too bad for those states, as this money was rejected from the respective governors. The two flattest states in America rejected the money for high-speed rail. Literally, why? This goes to show you that the state of Ohio is really the meme that the internet makes them out to be. If you live in Ohio, I'm so sorry. Anyways, because of all the environmental impact studies in 2005 being completed, this project was pushed to the front, with construction expected to begin in 2011 and being completed by 2014. But it wasn't completed in 2014.
Let me give you a travel warning. If you're a socialist, communist, somebody that believes in big government, I would think twice. Think twice if you're thinking about taking a vacation or moving to Florida. We're the free state of Florida. We actually don't believe in socialism. We actually know people, and some people understand lived under it, and we know people lived under socialism. It's not good. It's not good for anybody. So if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about coming to Florida and you're a socialist or communist, think twice. We like freedom, liberty, capitalism, things like that.
A once-in-a-lifetime gift, but tonight, Governor Rick Scott has turned down $2.4 billion in federal funding, putting the brakes on a high-speed rail line between Tampa and Orlando.
I believe the risk far outweighs the benefits.
Even with more than $2 billion in federal help, Rick Scott says high-speed rail is too expensive, ridership too uncertain, and the whole project just too big of a risk.
I don't see any way that anyone's going to get a return. And so I'm very concerned about the Florida taxpayers.
And likewise tonight, some taxpayers are worried too. People like Bill Denver, who runs a construction union of thousands of workers who were counting on building the line.
Electricians, carpenters, millwrights. Well, he's just shut down a bunch of jobs.
24,000 jobs at that, maybe more, supporters say, over a 5-year stretch. But those numbers were never mentioned by the governor today when he talked about killing the plan. Instead, he said he'd rather see money spent expanding state highways and seaports. But the federal money can't be spent on anything besides rail. And supporters like Tampa's mayor say jobs to build that line were a sure thing.
That's what we want. We talk about shovel-ready jobs. These were shovel-ready jobs.
And the question now is this project entirely dead?
Well, let me answer that question for you, Chris. Yes, it is. Now, you may be wondering, why would somebody turn down $2.4 billion in free money given by the federal government? I'll tell you why. It's because Rick Scott himself was already invested in Brightline. Because Rick Scott was running for senator, his family had to make financial statements public. Not only did the financial statements show that his family was much wealthier than he actually let on, but it also showed that his wife, Ann Scott, was invested in Fortress Investment Group. For those of you who don't know, Fortress Investment Group is the parent company to Florida East Coast Industries, and Florida East Coast Industries is the parent company to Brightline Florida. Now, I'm all for lobbying for better rail service, but when that better rail service lobbies against high-speed rail, what are we doing here? It's not the fact that he couldn't see a way the taxpayers were going to get a return, or the way that the state was going to get a return. It was the fact that he couldn't see a way that he himself was going to get a return. In other words, Rick Scott just scammed Florida out of high-speed rail, just so he can fill his own pockets. It's sad, because when you think about it, this is probably what California high-speed rail has to deal with on a yearly basis. People like this who come along and try to stop the project just to fill their own pockets. I think the worst part about this all is that he promised that this would take some of the burden off the taxpayers. But in reality, it did nothing of the sort. It just left taxpayers paying the same amount of money for a conventional rail service that they have little control over. And yes, Brightline does use taxpayer money, and I'll explain how later on in the video.
My name is Mike Reininger, and I'm the Executive Director of Florida East Coast Industries. We are an infrastructure and real estate development company based in Miami, where we are represented by your committee colleague and our distinguished Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson. FECI is the parent company of All Aboard Florida, which was established in 2012 to pursue passenger rail opportunities on a private for-profit basis. FECI traces its roots to the late 1890s and the company founded by Henry Flagler, who first introduced the integrated rail network, which gave rise to Florida's rapid growth. After some 120 years of continuous operations, that railroad remains a profitable private enterprise. Leveraging this legacy and historic assets, we have invested about $2 billion of private capital over the last 5 years, and in about 90 days, we will launch Brightline. This new express intercity passenger train will service the downtown cores in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. In addition, we are building over 1.5 million square feet of mixed-use development in and around our transit hubs, and these facilities will begin welcoming new occupants concurrent with the start of Brightline trains. The addition of integrated real estate development aligns two economic engines that directly support one another and creates a unified business platform that has more than one way to pay the bills.
Florida East Coast Industries is the oldest and largest commercial real estate company in Florida. It was founded in 1892. They have 3 separate businesses. The first company is Flagler Global Logistics, which is a logistics company. It's in the name. The second company is named Flagler, which is the real estate company. Don't worry, I had the names up on the screen just in case you get confused. They really said, what should I name this company? I think we should go with Flagler again. Brilliant idea. It's like, yeah, bro, we get it. Henry Flagler, move on. Anyways, the third company is All Aboard Florida. You may have noticed that I left out one particular company. It's time to break down this myth. The Florida East Coast Railway is not owned by Florida East Coast Industries. Therefore, Brightline and the Florida East Coast Railway are not owned by the same company. In fact, the last time they were owned by the same company, your little cousin was still hitting the whip in the nay-nay. The Florida East Coast Railroad was originally owned by the St. Joseph Paper Company, a commercial real estate company, until 1983. After that, Fox Holdings acquired them until the year 2000, until Florida East Coast Industries officially took over. 7 years later, Florida East Coast Industries would be acquired themselves. In 2007, they'd be purchased for $3 billion by the Fortress Investment Group, a company which had been making waves in the U.S. rail scene that year, acquiring and operating short-line railroad Rail America. Interestingly enough, the Florida East Coast Railway and Rail America would not be linked corporately. Rail America would continue to be publicly traded separately from the Florida East Coast Railway, marked with the ticker symbol RRA, then later changed to RA in 2009. This was done on purpose as Fortress Investment Group would later sell Rail America via initial public offering. This can be partially due to the fact that Fortress Investment Group was on the brink of bankruptcy in 2008. Regardless, in 2011, during the purchase, Rail America would acquire 3 Alabama short lines for $12.7 million. A year later, in 2012, they would be officially sold off to the Genesee in Wyoming for a deal valued at $1.39 billion. Fun fact about the Fortress Investment Group, after Harvey Weinstein did what he did, in 2017, Fortress Investment Group was in talks of providing a loan to the Weinstein Company. That same year, they also invested $100 million in Theranos. For those of you who don't know what Theranos is, Theranos was one of the largest scams in medical history. Theranos swindled hundreds of investors into investing in a fake product. Therefore, the Fortress Investment Group invested $100 million in a product that doesn't actually exist. If that isn't karma for even considering loaning money to Harvey Weinstein's company, I don't know what it is. Okay, so that information wasn't super important to Brightline, but at least now you know what the Fortress Investment Group is. In 2012, the same year that Rail America was traded, All Aboard Florida was created under Florida East Coast Industries. They would break ground in 2015, and they would announce that they would be going under the name that we know and love, Brightline. And at this point, this is where they started falsely advertising themselves as a high-speed rail company, as a replacement to the true high-speed rail company, and a sneaky attempt to blur the lines between the two projects for the public.
Here at Brightline, we are proud of our high-speed trains.
Yeah, no, I'm not going for that. Banks Rail, what is the definition of high-speed rail? Why, I'm glad you asked, Banks Rail. That was an excellent question. Thanks, Banks Rail. No problem, Banks Rail. Wow, he's a really cool guy. I should subscribe to him. The definition of high-speed rail varies. What most people will tell you is that high-speed rail is 155 miles on a new track and 124 miles on existing upgraded track. But let's actually do some research. Here's an article from the Environmental and Energy Study Institute. The EESI says, while there's no single international standard for high-speed rail, new train lines having speeds in excess of 250 kilometers per hour or 160 miles per hour and existing lines in excess of 200 kilometers per hour or 120 miles per hour are generally considered high speed. Okay, seems like most people were correct about that. But unfortunately, that still leaves Brightline short of high-speed rail. The part from Miami to West Palm Beach has a 79 mile per hour top speed, and the part from West Palm Beach to Cocoa has a 110 mile per hour top speed. The expansion from Cocoa to Orlando reaches 125 miles per hour, yet it's still on brand new tracks, so it doesn't meet the qualification for high-speed rail. Now I know what you're thinking.
Is that all you got?
Oh, no. That's just the tip of this iceberg. Read!
Generalization isn't good enough, so I decided to bring up another source. And this will put the final nail in the coffin. The US legal definition for high-speed rail is a train that can be reasonably expected to reach a sustained speed of more than 125 miles per hour. There are two factors that stand out in this statement alone. One of them is the word sustained. Along Brightline's Orlando corridor, the train only sustains a speed of 125 miles per hour for 15 miles of the line. This means that the train only hits 125 miles per hour for 7 minutes. That's not sustaining anything. On top of that, the definition says more than 125 miles per hour. And for many of you who have passed basic algebra, know that more than does not mean equal. These factors have led riders to be a little bit disappointed in the actual speed of Brightline itself, compared to driving. Now, there is a section under high-speed rail corridor development that says, the term high-speed rail means intercity passenger rail service that is reasonably expected to reach speeds of at least 110 miles per hour. However, this isn't the legal definition for high-speed rail, which was stated under definitions. This is just a general requirement to receive government grants. Now, I'll have more information about the average speed and everything else later on in this video. But in the meantime, let's go back to the history of Brightline. Fortress Investment Group would be acquired by SoftBank Group for $3.3 billion. SoftBank Group is a giant corporate conglomerate based in Japan. To show you how big the group is, as of 2020, their total assets reached $342 billion. I don't think this needs to be said, but Brightline is a spec to them. And slight conflict of interest, SoftBank is the largest shareholder in Uber. This is a reason why Brightline has been able to maintain a unique relationship with Uber. In an interesting move, Fortress Investment Group would completely sell off the Florida East Coast Railway to Grupo Mexico in 2018. Grupo Mexico is essentially a rail Goliath in Mexico. They have the largest rail fleet in the nation, as they're the same company that owns 74% of Ferromex. This means that the Florida East Coast Railway would no longer be a subsidiary of Florida East Coast Industries. But with the deal, Florida East Coast Industries will keep their trackage rights over the Florida East Coast Railway. In other words, Brightline doesn't own the trackage from Miami to Cocoa, so that's not the reason why they're allowed to run trains on it. The freight company is legally obligated to allow them to. I don't know, but that sounds a little bit familiar to another railroad in the US. I definitely don't see this setup becoming a problem in the future. Anyways, from what I've seen, the Florida East Coast Railroad has been a good sport about this whole thing, so as long as there's no weird falling out, I think Brightline's gonna be okay.
Today, we are all connected, brought together to celebrate a better way to get around Florida, a smarter way, an alternative to our state's crowded roads. Transportation that will unite the state of Florida, connecting you to the cities of Orlando, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami like never before, moving you seamlessly between new urban centers, strategically located exactly where you want to be, and speed, moving effortlessly between Miami and Orlando in 3 hours.
Boy, if you don't
while delivering you just steps away from local commuter trains, buses, and cabs. Moments away from endless opportunities to work and play. Florida, this is your transportation future. It's not just smart, it's Brightline.
Service from Miami to West Palm Beach would begin on May 19, 2018. This is around the same time that it became public that Rick Scott has a personal investment in the company. Luckily for him, Brightline's grand opening overshadowed that in the media. Brightline would open 3 stations in 2018, and 2 more in early 2023, leading to a total of 5 stations along the original corridor. Let's start from south to north. And while we look at this Brightline route, let's look at the original Florida high-speed rail route as well. This way we can compare and contrast the two. Brightline starts in downtown Miami, with Florida high-speed rail starting at the Miami airport. Miami Central is what I call a perfect modern-day train terminus. Miami Central began construction in 2014, and is actually built on the old station site that the Florida East Coast Railroad used to use in 1963. Until the Florida East Coast Railroad stopped passenger service because of operational costs. The station is elevated, has 5 tracks and 4 platforms. Tracks 1 through 3 are for Brightline, while tracks 4 through 5 are for Tri-Rail. 1 high-level side platform serves track 1, 1 high-level island platform serves track 2 and 3, 1 low-level island platform serves track 4, and 1 low-level side platform serves track 5. Unfortunately, Tribal has to use completely different platforms due to the fact that Tribal trains do not offer high-level boarding. Tribal trains were supposed to begin service into Miami Central in 2017, but was postponed due to problems with signaling and clearance issues on Tribal's platforms in the station. These have since been fixed. The first floor of the complex hosts commercial retail and the entrance to the station itself. The second floor is the mezzanine, which has more retail space and Brightline's lounge. And 50 feet up from the ground, or 15 meters up from the ground, are the platforms. Above the platforms are some of the best transit-oriented development in America. The station has 1 residential building with 800 apartments and 2 office buildings with a combined space of 286 square feet. Altogether, the station has around 130,000 square feet of retail space. The cherry on top is that Miami Central is connected directly to the Miami Metro Mover and the Miami Metro. This makes the station extremely easy to get to, unlike another station on this line, but we'll get to that later. Continuing north along the I-95, the Florida High Speed Rail Authority had 2 different alignments in mind, the Florida Turnpike route and the I-95 route. Both highways would have their medians widened for eventual track placement, the same way the Florida High Speed Rail Authority did with the I-4. It is important to remember that this would be the second phase for Florida High Speed Rail. Florida High Speed Rail would be built in the opposite direction of Brightline. Where Florida High Speed Rail would be building north to south, Brightline has been building south to north. Hence the reason why there are 2 proposed alignments for the Florida High Speed Rail Authority. The first stop for Florida High Speed Rail would have been Fort Lauderdale. Even though the map doesn't show it, both proposed alignments would have had this stop. The maximum speed of this section would have been around 110 to 125 miles per hour. Over to the east, Brightline trains are running at 79 miles per hour on the Florida East Coast Railroad. Their first stop is Aventura. Aventura opened up as an info station in December 2022. Brightline Express trains used to skip past the stop, but due to higher ridership, most Brightline trains are now stopping here. The Aventura station is located right across from the Aventura Mall. Despite how close the station is to the mall, US Route 1 creates a nice concrete border between the station and the mall. This means that unfortunately the station isn't that accessible. The station house is located on the west side of the Dixie Highway, but passengers board trains from an island platform in the center of the Florida East Coast Railroad right away. This means that a pedestrian bridge was needed to cross over the Dixie Highway and the 2 tracks of the Florida East Coast Railroad right away. The initial design of the station was to have the pedestrian bridge continue to cross over US Route 1. This would have allowed riders to walk straight to the Aventura Mall. Unfortunately, due to lack of funding and the station going over budget, the pedestrian bridge was cut. Fortunately, Brightline offers a complimentary shuttle to the mall for passengers. Unfortunately, the shuttle sucks. There have been many complaints from passengers that the shuttle just doesn't show up, passengers being stranded and having to take Ubers, and passengers just straight up missing their train. This can most likely be because of the horrible traffic just across US Route 1. I'm sure the mall shuttle has been a logistical nightmare for Brightline themselves. I mean, you get what you paid for. Should have built the pedestrian bridge from the beginning. Fortunately, Brightline isn't giving up on that pedestrian bridge, and the pedestrian bridge is now in the design phase. One last thing, Aventura also has low-level platforms. This is for a future commuter rail service that starts at Miami Central and terminates at Aventura. This Miami-Dade commuter rail project is called the Northeast Corridor.
He copied my whole fucking flow! Word for word! Bar for bar!
When this commuter railroad becomes up and running, the Florida East Coast Railroad will definitely need to be triple tracked. Anyways, after Aventura Station, we pass under State Road 854 and US Route 1 intersection grade separation. Most of the criticism on Brightline has been about the lack of grade separation in South Florida, which is fair. Over Brightline's 6 years of operation, Brightline has not alived 99 individuals. In fact, on the same day that the Orlando extension opened, Brightline not alived is 99th person. That's about 16.5 deaths per year. Now, not gonna lie, this is an unusually high number. And while people tend to blame the intellectual capabilities of your average Florida man, the reality is much more grim. A lot of these cases are of people who are not aliving themselves. Acts like these are part of a larger societal issue, such as homelessness, which is sad, not just for the person who lost their life, but also for the engineer of the train and anybody who witnesses the act. Hopefully more grade separation projects will come soon. Okay, moving further north, we pass through Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. Now, I'm not quite sure why Brightline doesn't have a station here. Oh, I know why. Because Broward County is planning to put a station here themselves. Yep, that's right, they too are planning to build a commuter rail line. I think that's one of the largest pluses about Brightline's existence. Different counties are now planning to build their own commuter rail line along the Florida East Coast Railroad, and Brightline paved the way for that. The double-tracked infrastructure is already there. All these counties need to do is just build stations with passing tracks. Brightline's Fort Lauderdale station was one of the original 3 stations to open, and has a similar layout to the Aventura station. Currently, Brightline offers a $10 shuttle from this station to the Fort Lauderdale airport. Unfortunately, this shuttle sucks. Again, there have been many complaints from passengers that the shuttle just doesn't show up, passengers being stranded and having to take Ubers, and passengers just straight up missing their train. Hopefully the eventual commuter rail service can help solve this problem and eliminate the need for the shuttle. What I do like about Brightline's Fort Lauderdale station is the fact that there's actually a bus terminal there to serve the station. Great accessibility, Brightline. The next stop for the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority's alignment is West Palm Beach. Brightline's next stop is Boca Raton. This stop opened alongside Aventura. However, the setup for this station is a little bit different. This station has 1 side platform. The original plan was to have 2 side platforms, but again, due to cutting back for cost, 1 side platform was chosen. This really doesn't matter that much because Boca Raton has had the lowest ridership out of the 5 stations on the original segment. This is reflected in the fact that most trains actually bypass this station. There are definitely good attractions and good density around the station, but nothing as significant or notable as the density and attractions in Fort Lauderdale or West Palm Beach or Miami. I mean, even Aventura has them all. But regardless of ridership, the station is good to have in general. The next step for Brightline is West Palm Beach. West Palm Beach for me would be my second favorite station on Brightline. I actually feel like it's a really underrated station. The station is located right in downtown and has amazing transit-oriented development. There's the Parkline Palm Beach apartments that are built right above the parking garage. This is a good use of space in my opinion. I mean, if you're going to build a parking deck, at least build something above it. Alright, so that's enough looking at the alignment. Let's get to the fun part.
Looking splendid is not the same as being really useful, said Thomas firmly. But best of all is being really useful and looking splendid, like me.
Brightline operates Siemens Charger SCB-40s, with the S standing for Siemens, the C standing for Chargers, and the B standing for Brightline. The 40 stands for the 4,000 horsepower that these locomotives have. Brightline operates one of the 4 current models that Siemens Mobility offers. The other 3 current Charger models go under the same naming scheme. Other models include the SC-44, which is popular amongst many other American railroads. These railroads include Amtrak Midwest, Caltrans, Coaster, Mark, and WashDOT. Oh yeah, and the Altamont Corridor Express. My bad. This is considered the base model of the Charger family. Amtrak and Via Rail are the 2 outliers that operate their own separate models, with the ALC-42 and the SCV-42 respectively. As you can probably tell from the name, the SCV-40 has the lowest amount of horsepower. All Charger locomotives have a maximum speed of 125 miles per hour in service, but are designed to go 135. Brightline's units are numbered 101 to 121. Oh yeah, and if you haven't noticed already, these are diesel locomotives. So yeah. Well, our company Brightline actually runs on biodiesel, so they're way cleaner, and yeah, sorry to cut you off, but leave it up to Brightline to run vegan diesel locomotives. Charger locomotives are often paired with Siemens venture cars. Brightline, Caltrans, Amtrak Midwest, and Via Rail currently operate said cars. Ontario Northland, WashDOT, and Amtrak still have theirs on order, with Brightline being the first among the railroads to have them delivered. Each railcar seats up to 74 people in economy class, and up to 62 in business class. However, Brightline is nice enough to give you some legroom, with 66 in their economy class and only 50 in their business class. Brightline's economy class, called the Smart Class, is in a 2-2 seating arrangement, with their premium class, which is their business class, sitting in a 2-1 arrangement. Seats in the Smart Class are 19 inches wide, with the premium class having 21-inch wide seats. Hey man, this is pretty good as some of us Americans can get pretty wide. Each railcar comes with its own restroom, and as you've seen in the last clip, is completely ADA accessible. The interior is pretty bright.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
With cream color seats and striped dark blue flooring to hide stains. The railcars come to a similar length as Amtrak's Amfleets at 85 feet. These too have a maximum speed of 125 miles per hour. And I know there are going to be some people that are going to say, well, Banks Rail, I just saw them test at 130 miles per hour. It is a standard for the FLHRS to test trains faster than they're actually going to go in service. This is the same reason why the current first-gen Acellas were tested at 160 miles per hour rather than the 150 miles per hour that they actually do in current service now. Testing the train's speed faster than they're actually going to do in service ensures that the train is able to reach that speed and maintain that speed with guaranteed no difficulty. This way they can ensure the safety of both the crew and the passengers on board. Even planes are tested at high G-forces in order to ensure that the plane's mechanical systems are able to operate well within their boundaries in actual service. On top of that, Siemens Chargers and Siemens Ventures are rated as Tier 1 vehicles by the FRA. Tier 1 vehicles are conventional rolling stock that cannot pass 125 miles per hour in service. High-speed rail includes the FRA's Tier 2 and Tier 3 vehicles. Currently in the United States, there's only one Tier 2 and one Tier 3 vehicle, with the first gen Acela being Tier 2 and the Aventura Liberty being Tier 3. With that being said, literally every other FRA certified passenger rail vehicle is rated Tier 1. So no, Brightline will never reach 130 miles per hour in actual service. Even though there are some interesting articles that claim that Brightline is going to go 150 miles per hour on the Orlando to Tampa line. And these are articles from 2022. Most of these articles have been updated though. I'm not gonna lie, it is kind of funny to see that they have Brightline setting the new world record speed for diesel locomotives.
Oh, not you fucking not again. What the fuck do you want him
Level boarding comes at a height of 48 inches. Brightline's Venture cars don't offer stepped boarding, as all their stations are equipped with high-level platforms. Their cars weigh just less than half of their locomotive counterparts. Both Venture cars and locomotives are manufactured in Florida, California. Currently, there are 845 cars that are built or on order. Brightline is receiving 44 of them. Each Brightline train set has 4 Venture cars. 3 of them are in Smart service, with 1 in Premium service. 2 Siemens SCB-40 Charger locomotives are on each side. Sheesh, Brightline, why don't you add a third one? It's not like you're only pulling 4 cars. All jokes aside, it is interesting that Brightline didn't go for the Siemens Venture cab cars, but I assure you, there is a reason for this. If you've seen any of Brightline's platforms, you might notice that they're a little bit long, with all platforms built to board 10 cars. This is because Brightline plans to lengthen their trains as ridership increases. Ah, yes, Brightline always seems to plan for the future, don't they? Good job. Having 2 locomotives also helps Brightline's trains get over some pretty nasty grades on the new Orlando line. Those grades have the work trains from Gaddick struggling, man. Brightline's 4-car concourse can carry 248 passengers. Shout out to Lab at Rockwell Group, who came up with the entire Brightline scheme and concept. They often work with museums, malls, and even Google for design concepts. The cars are divided into 5 colors: bright red, bright pink, bright orange, bright green, and bright blue. However, all the locomotives are the same colors, which makes it easier for them to switch locomotives from concourse to concourse. It is cool to see that they paid attention to the continuity between the locomotives and the rest of the train set, as a lot of railroads, Amtrak Midwest, seem to struggle with this.
Police! Help! Police! Help! Police! Help!
Man, that's bad. Brightline trains also just look faster. This is because they use a sneaky trick around the windows. This is called a cheat line. Cheat lines are painted strips that go horizontally across the train set's windows. You might notice them on airplanes. The name cheat line actually comes from aircrafts, but I just took it because there's no actual name for train sets. Cheat lines help the windows blend in with the rest of the train set. By doing this, the train appears more streamlined to onlookers. Even Amtrak's M fleets do this. Could you imagine what they would look without them? Don't have to. Here's a picture.
Whoa, whoa, hey.
Yep, soak it all in. You probably noticed the Acela doesn't have a cheat line, and now probably never will. Why Amtrak, why? The Aventura Liberty, the fastest slow-looking train, and Brightline, the slowest fast-looking train. America. Nonetheless, it is refreshing to see American railroads step away from that stainless steel look, so kudos to Brightline's design team. Okay, so now that we covered everything from when Brightline first opened, let's go back to the history. Later that year in November, Fortress Investment Group would acquire Express West, a private rail company with plans to connect LA with Las Vegas. Also in November 2018, it was announced that Virgin Group would become a minority investor in Brightline. Brightline would be rebranded as Virgin Trains USA, completely destroying all the hard work that Lab from Rockwell Group went into creating the Brightline scheme.
We're actually operating trains. The construction really only started in earnest a little over 3 years ago. So in 3 years to have 3 train stations, 5 gleaming train sets, and 70 miles of infrastructure in place, billions of dollars invested into this, there's an enormous excitement in the state about what we're doing, and the early numbers have been extremely encouraging now that we've started operating, so we're excited for what the future holds for Brightline.
Thank you all for joining the making of Brightline. I, for one...
In 2020, literally 3 years later, Brightline would show us the future of American private passenger railroading by completely closing its doors, stopping service, and laying off 250 workers. Shout out to them. So excited for more private passenger rail companies to operate in the US. Yay! Well, Brightline doesn't use any taxpayer money, so it's up to them whether or not they want to run service. It's not like a cent of our money went to them. This is false. Yeah, I know there's some of you that look at your screen like, there's no way, these motherfuckers. But before you blow up your house and die, let me explain why. Passenger transportation has never really been a lucrative business. No matter what mode of transportation, plane, bus, boat, train, car, plane. Did I say plane? Yeah, passenger airlines are heavily subsidized. Could you imagine the cost overruns that they had to single-handedly pay for maintenance fees and construction costs for airports? An economy class ticket from LA to New York would be like $1K. And don't even let me begin with car transportation. Nonetheless, even without paying the full cost for the facilities, many passenger transportation companies also transport cargo, as it's not just your luggage that sits underneath you on the plane. There are some passenger airlines that have their cargo sector flat out carrying their whole company, as if it were Tom Brady in Super Bowl 51. And private railroads also used to carry out this strategy until, well, until that. This is because passenger transportation inherently loses money. You might make profit on each trip, but the profit rarely covers the operational costs for the facilities and the infrastructure. Transporting cargo just so happens to be lucrative, and if you don't have a cargo sector or have a very small cargo sector, it's not surprising if the federal or local government ends up subsidizing your company, and it just so happens that Brightline falls directly under that category. For example, Brightline's Boca Raton station was supposed to come in at $40 million, with the city of Boca Raton spending $9.9 million on the project. As all modern public works go, the price said and increased to $56 million. Another one. With the FRA chipping in an additional $16.3 million to cover the cost. Oh, and there was $3.9 million spent on the beautification project. And that information goes to anybody who's peddling the
private companies don't face cost overruns
argument. And
that's just the tip of this iceberg.
In addition to that $26.2 million from Boca Raton, another one. Miami-Dade County spent $76 million building the Aventura station. Oh, but we're not done there. Another one. Can't skip past that $684 million complex that Brightline's going to use for the Orlando expansion, which, by the way, was completely funded by the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority and Florida DOT. Another example, another one, though not sure it's still needed, is the $25 million federal grant that Brightline received to enhance safety around the crossings, with anticipation that this will hopefully stop Florida drivers.
That's a lot of damage. How about a little more?
So, let me bring out my calculator real quick. That's $811.2 million in funding. This is excluding Boca Raton's $3.9 million beautification project. And that's direct funding. Brightline has over $3.2 billion in tax-free bonds. This is all information that you can find online. Unfortunately, because Brightline's a private company, there's a lot of information you can't find online, such as who are the investors, what is the yield rate, what is the interest rate. Without all this information, I can't calculate the exact amount that the federal and state government isn't collecting. All we do know is that the state and the federal government are not collecting a lot of money. So the best we can say is that $811.2 million in funding plus X. Just know that the value for X is massive and is somewhat dependent on whether or not Brightline is profitable. Regardless, the value of X will always exist, as this money was lent by investors, and Brightline will have to pay it back, which is very important to remember. Brightline has to pay this money back. This means that Brightline is actually in debt. So in all honesty, as much as it pains me to say this as a passenger rail advocate, Brightline could go belly up in a similar fashion to the old Auto Train Corporation, but then we'd probably just end up with New Amtrak Florida service available January 2037. Get your tickets at www.amtrakflorida.com. That's www.amtrakflorida.com. Either way, the government's going to be paying for it. Speaking of bankrupt private passenger rail companies, later that year in August, Brightline announced that Virgin had not provided the agreed investment money and that they'd be ending the branding deal. This wasn't a good couple years for Virgin Trains, because at this point, Virgin Trains in the UK was completely dead. Virgin Trains would get desperate and sue Brightline for $231 million, and a lawsuit that would be settled privately. That same year, Fortress Investment Group would change the name of Express West to BrightlineWest. Brightline was shut down for 20 months, and finally reopened in November 2021. During the shutdown, Brightline negotiated with Aventura and the city of Boca Raton to place new stations. In late 2022, those stations would be completed. Sometime during mid-2023, Brightline announced that they would be opening the Orlando extension sometime before September. During this time, Brightline struggled to pick a final alignment for the Tampa extension. You see, Brightline wanted to use State Road 417 straight to the I-4 in Disney. Disney was also happy with this alignment. You see, Walt Disney was originally going to donate the land in their park for the station. However, Orange County wanted Brightline to stop at the convention center. This stop would be a lot closer to SeaWorld and University Studios. This is a reminder that Walt Disney makes entertainment for children. This means that their actions in this next section of the video can only be described as such, an action of a child. Brightline, knowing that this new alignment would be more expensive, but also knowing that it depended on government help, knew that not picking the alignment that the government wanted could mean the death of the project. At this point, Universal pulled the same move as Disney and decided that they would also donate their land for the station. Seeing this, Brightline sided with the government's alignment. After this decision, Disney all of a sudden pulled back their donation of the land, in a pretty obvious way to slow down the project and make it more difficult for Brightline to put a station at Disney. You know, in a sort of corporate temper tantrum.
Wake up, you little prick! Who do you work for, DreamWorks? Answer me, huh?
Don't work for anybody.
Oh boy, I sure believe that. You just tried to ruin Disney Company's big night for your own amusement, huh?
The hell did you do to us?
Shut up!
After that, Brightline announced that they would be buying land near Disney for their station. It's actually funny because just over a decade ago, the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority was having the same argument with Disney. You see, Walt Disney was originally going to donate the land in their park for the station. This is because they wanted a direct high-speed rail line from their park to the Orlando airport. No stops will be placed in between. However, the state and the county wanted to stop at the Orange County Convention Center. After this decision, Disney all of a sudden pulled back their donation of the land, in a pretty obvious way to slow down the project and make it harder for the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority to serve Disney. You know, in a sort of corporate temper tantrum.
You better start talking! You better start talking right now!
We told you, we aren't working for another studio and there isn't a plan to sabotage your big night.
After that, the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority simply stated that they were just going to buy land near Disney for their station. I don't know, there's something about Disney doing this twice in a row that just, it's like when satire becomes reality. For now, Brightline was running tests on their Orlando to Cocoa segment. In one of the tests, Brightline's bright green train set the rail speed record for Florida. I know for anybody who's traveled on any actual high-speed train or like just a normal regional train that this might not seem as interesting, but you know, we have to give them their props somewhere. Anyways, the train reached a whopping 130 miles per hour on the segment, absolutely flying past cars and swamp. Unfortunately, during the testing, some issues were found. This means that Brightline's opening was pushed back to September 22nd, and this is September 22nd, 2023. Brightline was supposed to open the Orlando expansion in 2022. Hey, nobody ever said building rail transportation in America was easy. On September 22nd, Brightline operated its first revenue service from Orlando to Miami. That same day, Brightline also not alive its 99th person, and that leaves us to where we are today. Alright, so let's briefly talk about the alignment from West Palm Beach. The next stop on the alignment for the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority would have been Fort Pierce. After that, the two alignments had their largest split. This is because the Turnpike and I-95 go two different directions. I-95 stays coastal, while the Turnpike goes inland. Only the I-95 route gets a station at Melbourne. The Turnpike route goes straight to the Orlando airport, awkwardly approaching it from the south. Even though I'm pretty sure this alignment would be cheaper, I'm not too much of a fan of the southern approach to the station. This means that trains from Tampa would have to enter Orlando station, and then the engineer would have to change cabs in order to continue the journey to Miami. And the same actions would have to be repeated and vice versa. Now, this isn't uncommon for some high-speed rail systems to do this, but I don't think that pursuing this option when building from scratch would have been the best decision. After the I-95 stop at Melbourne, Melbourne, the alignment goes north along I-95 until it reaches State Road 528. From there, it literally does Brightline's alignment. I would like to add that after Fort Pierce, speeds along the I-95 route and the Turnpike route would have likely reached 186 miles per hour during this section. This is because both alignments generally have to contend with urban areas less during this section. The same could be said for Brightline. Because there are less urban areas around the Florida East Coast Railroad during this section, Brightline trains are able to open it up to 110 miles per hour. After all, the less urban areas there are, the less grade crossings there are. But the key word is less. Around 80% of the grade crossings on the Florida East Coast Railroad are pretty horrible, and some of the worst offenders are on this upcoming section. Now, your standard grade crossing looks a little bit like this. However, a lot of the grade crossings on the Florida East Coast Railroad look like this. Back around like a century ago, where people used to travel less by cars, highways were often built directly next to railroads. This is because land was already partially cleared, cheap, and easily accessible. Unfortunately, when new roads were built to spur off from the highway, it created junctions like this. But like, nobody really cares, right? Like, nobody drives, everybody takes the train, nobody takes a car. That would be ludicrous. A junction like this will never become a problem. Just less than a century later, it indeed became a problem. But just like the rising sea levels, the Florida government chose to ignore it. This is the reason why I don't put too much blame on Brightline or Floridians. I'm gonna be honest, most people in America do not deserve their driver's license. Driver's licenses in America are handed out like candy on Halloween. Combine that with junctions like this, with grade crossings like this, oh yeah, I just know the insurance rates are crazy. And before we make fun of them, let's remember that most of these unskilled drivers are forced to drive due to the fact that there's no adequate public transportation. These people aren't dumb, they're just a victim of the car-brain society that Florida has nurtured. When incidents are this tragic and this frequent, don't blame the railroad, don't blame the drivers, blame the state DOT, because grade crossings like this should have never been built in the first place, nor should they be operational in 2023. So most of these grade crossings are pretty bad. But here are some of my worst offenders. Southeast Cove Road, Southeast Decker Ave, Southeast Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Downtown Stewart is just all bad. Downtown Ocean Breeze is almost just as bad. Downtown Vero Beach is... yeah. And downtown Melbourne. Why do you need so many crossings? Honestly, some of them just don't even serve a point. The amount of unnecessary redundancy is crazy. Anyways, there are some 110 mile per hour sections along this corridor. Brightline did a great job of widening some of the curves along the corridor where they could. However, that doesn't mean that the entire corridor is 110 miles per hour. A lot of sections are nowhere near that. Most of the 110 mile per hour sections for Brightline are north of St. Lucie River. Speaking of, the St. Lucie Bridge is just one of the sections of the alignment that is just... Trains are only permitted to go 25 miles per hour due to the curve north of the bridge. Man, and I thought the Northeast Corridor was bad. 25 miles per hour? Might as well put a station in Stewart. The trains are going to be massively decelerating there anyways. Speaking of Stewart, even though Stewart seemed like they were anti-Brightline with all the lawsuits they were giving them, the point of the lawsuit was to make sure that Brightline was legally obligated to make a stop on the Treasure Coast. Which is smart. They had the upper hand, stood their ground, and got a station out of it. Now that's the type of NIMBYism I like.
Hi.
Okay.
During this section, Brightline trains will be running at 125 miles per hour the entire way. Nah, just kidding. It's just this little section, this little slip right here where they hit 125 miles per hour. Yeah, that's about 17 miles. But yes. Let's all talk about how the Acela only reaches 150 miles per hour for 50 miles of its entire route. And because people, and even me, go in on the Acela for only reaching 150 miles per hour for that short of the route, I'm definitely gonna go in on Brightline. 125 miles per hour for only 17 miles? How are people even uttering Brightline Florida and California high-speed rail in the same sentence?
Oh, well, Brightline Florida is built to California high-speed rail isn't.
Yeah, no duh. Try building right-of-way for a sustained 220 miles per hour. It's not easy. Even the Northeast Regional can beat Brightline Florida. The fastest Acela train from New York to Washington and the fastest Brightline train from Miami to Orlando are two good comparisons. Both routes are relatively straight, and I say relatively because they both have some of their problems, and both trains have a similar amount of intermediate stops, with the fastest Acela train having 4 and the fastest Brightline train having 3. Even if we take the fastest Northeast Regional, which has 8 intermediate stops, it's still faster than Brightline's fastest option. Yet nobody calls the Northeast Regional high-speed rail because it's exactly what its name says.
Regional rail.
I just don't understand why we're building brand new right-of-way for 125 miles per hour, then clapping our hands when trains on the Northeast Corridor have been doing it for decades on existing rail. I mean, I'm happy that Brightline is doing something, but this isn't groundbreaking. This isn't new. This isn't even innovative. I swear, we put 2 pointy-nosed diesel locomotives on the end of a consist, and all of a sudden, people are treating the train like it's the TGV. I think the added cherry on top is the fact that this right-of-way is single-tracked. And I know that this was done initially to keep costs down, but Brightline trains are already being affected by this. Passengers are already complaining about delays. If one inbound train to Orlando is a couple minutes late, then the outbound train from Orlando has to wait too because it has to wait for the inbound train to clear the single track. And of course, some delays might happen. We already talked about some of the accidents that happen at the crossings, but also the fact that Brightline trains are sharing the track with freight. Simply put, this creates a lot of delays that are simply out of Brightline's control. Add the single track, the unelectrification, the speeds, and whelp, you got Amtrak Midwest. Congratulations, Florida. Really knocked it out the park with this one. Anyways, welcome to Orlando Station. Fun fact about the station before I tear into it. Because the Orlando Airport Station was already planned with public funding, you know, from back when the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority was going to use it, the station actually kept its original design that was supposed to be used on all Florida High-Speed Rail Authority stations. I mean, they definitely cut back a little bit, but you can see it. Pretty cool, right? It's like you get a peek into the early 2000s. Alright, but let's talk about station location. I don't think I was ever a fan of this station's location. Not only is it just not in the city. Alright, well, it benefits from being at an airport, I guess. But it's also just not even near the main terminals. The station is located all the way over at Terminal C. You have to take a 1.5 mile long people mover just to get there. But let's be honest, this isn't really Brightline's fault. I mean, it is a little bit because they're using a decade-old plan that was left over from the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority. They could have just not went with this, but I'm going to put most of the blame on the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority. I understand that we're trying to be cheap and do things like locate the station at the airport and run the train along the highway. But by doing this, we can sometimes miss out the key factor of rail transportation. Orlando to Miami, right? Trains can beat planes at this distance. Taking the train at this distance is simply more convenient. A lot more convenient than driving to the airport and catching a flight. But when we locate the city station at said city's airport, you basically strip all that convenience away. Now, in the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority's defense, their trains would have traveled at 186 miles per hour. This means that they probably wouldn't have this big of an issue. The train speed would make up for some of the inconvenience. Unfortunately, speed is something Brightline doesn't have. I mean, there's a very real possibility that you can drive from the city center of Orlando to the city center of Miami faster than Brightline.
Yeah, that's not good.
There's also a possibility that the Orlando Airport Station might host Sunrail as well, but Sunrail will most likely be serving the airport more than Brightline itself. I say that because while I believe that the Sunrail extension is a nice addition, the current planned track alignment for the service is so inefficient for passengers using Sunrail to get downtown that the local bus is actually faster. This is why, although I support the extension, I don't think that Sunrail is going to be a big game changer, especially not for Brightline. Both of them are just not fast enough modes for travel within the state. One thing that people brought up a lot after the Orlando extension opened was not only the fact that Brightline was slower than driving, but the fact that it's actually more expensive.
So here's the bottom line financially. Your Brightline ticket costs $79. And I figured out the cost of my trip using the federal mileage reimbursement calculator. It does gas, wear and tear. That places my trip at $92 plus another $16 for tolls, and it's $108. Actually cheaper to take Brightline than drive.
Well, there you have it.
Not quite, because most people don't go to Orlando alone. take a family of 4 and do the kiddie rates, and you're over $200. I'm still at 108. The more people, the better the deal on driving. Right?
But hey, hold on a minute. You missed a key point, Mr. Investigative Reporter. Most people, when they're going to Orlando, are going to a theme park and have to pay for parking, which Brightline riders don't have to pay.
No, and you're right. Good point. So, theme park parking tickets about $45. So that drives the price up for driving now to $153. But you're going to have to get from the airport here to a theme park and take an Uber or a Lyft.
And while rates may vary, the average cost of an Uber is $34, putting your Brightline tab at $270.
So here's the bottom line when you add it all up. It's a savings if you drive in a family of 4 of about $120. You can double that for a round trip. And I've done all the calculations for you. It's going to be on our webpage at WPTV.com.
$79 from Orlando to Miami is insane. There are last-minute tickets for Spirit Airlines that are cheaper than that. I'd see the appeal for Brightline if it was actually stopping at Orlando, but it's stopping at the same airport that Spirit is serving. I mean, we can sit here all day and talk about
the service quality of Spirit Airlines,
but when it's 3 times faster and $10 cheaper, for people who are time crunched and short on money, this isn't even a competition. Then I looked up Thanksgiving tickets for Brightline versus Thanksgiving tickets for Amtrak. At the time I recorded this, the Silver Meteor was around 50% full. The train departs at 8 a.m. and takes around 5 hours to complete its journey. Price tag for coach was around $38. The price tag for a private room was $256. Brightline, who are you feeling like when you can charge $120 for a trip that's only 2 hours faster? On top of that, you can get a private room with Amtrak with breakfast and lunch included, cheaper than Brightline's premium service. Now we can sit here and say that this is because of demand, and I really hope so, but I don't think so. It seems like Brightline is using perceived demand in order to price their tickets, instead of using the current demand base that Amtrak is using. Furthermore, Brightline's marketing is just leagues better than Amtrak. I already showed you how they sped up the footage for their promotional video to the point where the train was going approximately 220 miles per hour. Does this count as being deceptive? Yeah, but people won't know until they ride the train for themselves. Now, unless you're like me, a person who takes trains no matter the inconvenience, there's not really a market for a train from Miami to Orlando Airport, but I do see a hidden market that Brightline may be going after in the future. You see, trains are not like planes, therefore they shouldn't be treated as such. Everybody talks about Orlando to Miami, but nobody talks about Orlando to Boca Raton or Orlando to Aventura. These cities don't have their own airports. In both cases, it's a 30-minute drive to the nearest airport that has flights that serve Orlando, making Brightline actually the winning option. Infill stations might lower Brightline's average speed, but it will definitely increase ridership. Infill stations will definitely be integral to Brightline's success, especially along the Treasure Coast. Over there, planes aren't a competition, and Brightline is actually faster than driving. Stations at Melbourne, Fort Pierce, Vero Beach, and even Stewart could be great for ridership. This is a reminder that trains aren't used just for point-to-point service. The stations in between matter. California High Speed Rail. With that being said, let's briefly talk about the future of Brightline. In the near future, meaning within this decade, I predict that we're going to see 2 major things happen for Brightline. Brightline, meaning Brightline Florida. The most immediate thing that I can see happening is stations opening on the Treasure Coast. Cities such as Stewart have already been applying for Brightline stations. The next thing I see is Brightline starting construction out to Tampa. Trains will follow a revised version of the Florida High Speed Rail Authority's old alignment. Trains to Tampa will leave from the southern end of the Orlando Airport station. Past Brightline's base camp, trains will use the OUC branch line. After that, trains will turn north briefly with Sunroad before turning west on Taft Road. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure how they're going to make this turn, especially seeing that the landowner is developing a warehouse at that site. All I'm saying is, some structures are going to have to be demolished. After that, trains will have to run on a viaduct over Taft Road, then on an embankment in a vacant right-of-way until they reach State Road 528. The alignment runs on the north side of 528 until it reaches the land that Universal donated for the project. This is where the Orange County Convention Center station would be. After that, there's a viaduct backed over State Road 528 and then another viaduct along the I-4. Then there's a stop at Disney, and then Brightline continues down the median of the I-4. Here's what the I-4 looks like now. And here's what FDOT plans to do with it. I literally have no words for this. I'm just gonna move on. Brightline is planning to put a station in downtown Tampa. Okay, good for them. The highway basically runs right through there. Do I think that Brightline Florida is gonna electrify in the future? No. They've already committed to the pointy-nosed diesel life, and while I made a video for it for April Fools, there's simply no reason for Brightline to do it unless they're trying to go for zero emissions, which the company has never expressed as their objective. I don't care what anybody says about the hurricanes or the Florida East Coast Railroad's double-stack containers, it is possible for Brightline to electrify. Other countries have already dealt with these issues. Watch people in the YouTube comments.
But those countries aren't America.
Well, in America, there are in certain places double-stack containers under catenary. In other words, those are not valid excuses. The only valid excuse is we just care about our wallets more than we care about the environment. Actually, I don't really think that's a valid excuse. That's just the underlying reason why companies don't do it in America. It still would be cool to see electrified freight on the Florida East Coast Railroad though. Do I believe that Brightline will be able to operate their trains at 125 miles per hour on the Florida East Coast Railroad though? Maybe. Contrary to popular belief, the FRA can certify grade crossings for 125 miles per hour, but it's very difficult and very rare that the FRA does this. In other words, there's going to have to be a lot of grade separation. What are my opinions? Let's start off with the pros because I believe there are a lot of them. The largest pro of Brightline is the fact that they're exposing rail travel to an extremely car-dependent state. Yes, there's Amtrak, Tri-Rail, and Sunrail, but that's it. This is what many of Floridians think of when they think about passenger rail, and I'm happy to see that Brightline is changing that. Not only is Brightline receiving funding from the government for its operations, but we can also see Tri-Rail and Sunrail taking this opportunity to expand as well, with a lot of their expansions being along the Brightline corridor. We're also seeing a whole other commuter railroad pop up in South Florida, which in the future may or may not be operated by a Brightline subsidiary. Hey, maybe Tri-Rail operates it. All we know is that it's going to be fully subsidized, which is a step in the right direction for Florida. Another pro is how well Brightline interacts with the community. Both the railroad and the community around it have well adapted to each other, and I feel like that's really important for public transportation. This creates a general enthusiasm for more passenger rail in the state. We can also look at Brightline in a glass half full type of way. Yeah, it's not high-speed rail, but it's better than Florida not building anything at all. Unfortunately, I'm a glass half empty type of guy, and I actually have an ounce of ambition. So let's talk about the cons. I believe Florida could do much better. Brightline isn't the Florida High-Speed Rail Authority. Brightline isn't even the Florida Overland Express. Both of those trains would have traveled from 168 miles per hour to 220 miles per hour. And I don't want to hear that, well, we want a private company nonsense, because the Florida Overland Express was a private company, and Florida still sold the bag. If Florida would have went with this private company, Florida would have had the first 220 mile per hour high-speed rail line in the Americas. 2 decades before California, and only half a decade after America's first high-speed rail line, the Acela. Okay, well, that got passed up, but Floridians still wanted high-speed rail, so they created a public authority to do it. Barely any state funding would have been spent on the construction. The construction would have been fully federally funded, with private companies held responsible for any cost overruns. This setup was nearly perfect, yet one single person got in the heads of many Floridians and somehow convinced them to vote to cancel the funding for the project, just so he can benefit off of it with his own investment. This is why I'm not sure we want to be echoing this, well, this is good because now we don't have to directly fund passenger rail sentiment, because this is rhetoric left over from Rick Scott, who scammed Florida for his own benefit in the first place. Let me put it another way, just in case we're still lost. This multi-millionaire scammed not just Florida, because some of the federal money was actually spent, but he scammed the entire United States so that everyday people have to use a slower, less efficient system that he's invested in. And while we're on this topic, let's talk about private companies operating passenger rail. Now, if we're trying to operate this passenger rail service as public transportation and not some scenic cruise or whatever, it should be owned by the public. Public transportation is a service, just like the police department, just like the fire department, and just like your roads and bridges, and medical care if you're not in America. That's a whole other topic though. But generally, the government uses our taxes to maintain these. And the reason why? Because safety and mobility are some of our key factors to life nowadays. All I'm going to say is, it's hard to go to your doctor's appointment for your hip replacement when you have no actual way of getting there. And for many low-income people in America, mobility is one of the hardest things to achieve. And while Brightline is a great service, it doesn't really do anything to alleviate that. $79 for a train that's not much faster than driving is not a great way to motivate people, especially low-income people, to vote for more rail transit. After all, why would you vote for something that you're financially barred from using? And I'm not opposed to Brightline's existence. I think Brightline can operate, but it needs more funding, actual tax funding. Okay, well, maybe you don't want a higher tax rate. Then how about we move some of the funding over from highways, from building this into building this? Actual transit. I just find it so weird that people complain about higher taxes for rail transit, but then don't complain about higher taxes for highway expansions. And the reason I think Brightline needs more government funding is because I'm legitimately concerned if Brightline will be able to operate past the next 2 decades. After watching Brightline shut down for 18 months, and watching every other passenger railroad continue operations, some even for free, I truly believe that it's a very real possibility that Brightline will not be around in the next 2 decades. Especially seeing the fact that some major financial crisis has to happen every other decade. I don't know what that is, but what I'm saying is, Brightline isn't in a better position because they're a private company. They're in a more vulnerable position because they're a private company. To further my point, let me bring up this example. In the year 2022, Bloomberg says that Brightline reported losses of $260 million. And according to the New York Times, Brightline has collected over $38 million in revenue, double of what it earned in 2022. Yay! But by my estimates, if we keep the same expense for 2022 for 2023, that's still a loss. This means that Brightline and Amtrak have something in common. They have yet to be profitable. The one thing that they don't have in common is only one of them can afford to be unprofitable. And this is why I believe that Brightline should either be A, government owned, or B, have a larger safety net. We can talk about the real estate assets being a safety net, but those real estate assets are owned by the Florida East Coast Industries' own subsidiary, which means that if push comes to shove, and Brightline isn't the best investment that they thought it would be, the Florida East Coast Industry or Fortress Investment Group can simply cut Brightline out and keep the real estate, paying back any remaining loans through the real estate they kept. My one real glimpse of hope of Brightline service remaining is the deal they struck with Miami-Dade, where the county would pay Brightline $50 million up front, with a $12 million annual fee for 30 years, just for their commuter rail to have track access. This is honestly a huge win for Brightline. Amtrak gets paid less by SEPTA and New Jersey Transit for use of the Northeast Corridor. My last issue with Brightline is marketing. I understand that we use high-speed rail as a buzzword in order to garner more attention for a project, but this can negatively affect actual high-speed rail projects, such as California High-Speed Rail, Amtrak's Acela, or even BrightlineWest itself. I want everybody to know that building rail transportation in America is not easy, and Brightline definitely deserves their props there. But high-speed rail is a completely different level of difficulty in America. When you throw around the word high-speed rail, it confuses the general public. I guess what I'm saying is, I want people to value Brightline service for what it is, and not for what it isn't. This is the whole reason why I started making videos in the first place. Once we get a better understanding of what we're looking at, we can all start making better decisions for transportation in America. And I understand that it's difficult to do that. All around us we see watered down reporting, and even false advertisement. But our transportation system is never going to get better by lying to ourselves. So with this video, I hope we all get a better understanding of the truth about Brightline. What are you, crazy? Did you actually make it to the end of this video? I'm impressed. I didn't think attention spans this long lasted anymore. You are a special one amongst the rest of us. You have earned my ultimate respect. Now brag about it in the comment section below. Write something like, #I finished it. Brag on all of them short attention spanners. You deserve the right to. Thanks for watching my longest video ever. Like I said, it took a lot of work putting this together, and it took a while, but you know, I got through it. With that being said, if I earned your like and subscription, I love you, and if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching.